In an alternate reality, the United States of America was once a thriving nation, celebrated for its diversity and innovation. But as the years passed, a dark force began to seep into the hearts of its citizens, an all-consuming hatred that spread like wildfire. It wasn't always this way. Once, the streets of every city were alive with the sounds of different languages, the scents of various cuisines, and the laughter of people from all walks of life. But now, a heavy silence hung over the land, punctuated only by angry shouts and the distant sound of sirens. As hatred became the norm, trust dissolved. Communities that had once been close-knit were now fractured, divided along lines of race, religion, and ideology. Neighbors who used to greet each other with smiles now walked with eyes downcast, avoiding contact. Social media, once a platform for sharing joy and ideas, turned into a battleground of insults and accusations. People barricaded themselves in their homes, fearful of the world outside and even more fearful of those who were different. The first sparks of violence ignited in the heart of New York City, where a peaceful protest against a new discriminatory law turned into a bloody clash. The police, no longer seen as protectors but as enforcers of a hateful regime, met protesters with tear gas and batons. The violence quickly spread to other cities: Los Angeles, Chicago, Miami. It wasn't long before the entire nation was engulfed in chaos. What started as street brawls escalated into full-blown riots, and eventually, into a civil war that tore families and communities apart. In this new world, discrimination was not just an undercurrent. It was a way of life, institutionalized and enforced. Laws were passed that segregated public spaces, restricted voting rights, and barred certain groups from holding jobs. The government, now run by a coalition of hate groups, used propaganda to fuel the fire, blaming society's ills on minorities and immigrants. The Statue of Liberty, once a symbol of hope and freedom, now stood as a grim reminder of what had been lost. As the hatred continued to spread, the nation's mental health deteriorated. The constant fear and hostility led to a surge in anxiety, depression, and other mental illnesses. Hospitals overflowed with patients, but there were not enough doctors or therapists to treat them. In a society where empathy was seen as a weakness, those struggling with their mental health were left to suffer in silence, their cries for help unheard. With the country in turmoil, the economy crumbled. Businesses closed their doors, unable to operate in an environment of constant fear and instability. The stock market crashed, and unemployment soared. The brightest minds and skilled workers fled the country, seeking refuge in safer lands. Foreign investors pulled out, and the once thriving economy ground to a halt. The American dream became a distant memory, replaced by a nightmare of poverty and desperation. The democratic institutions that had once been the bedrock of American society were dismantled. The government, now an authoritarian regime, silenced dissent and censored the media. Elections were rigged, and opposition leaders were imprisoned or exiled. The rule of law was replaced by the rule of fear, and justice became a tool of oppression. The country's founding principles of liberty and justice for all were nothing more than hollow words. With hatred stifling creativity, the cultural landscape of the nation withered. Art, literature, and music, once rich and diverse, became tools of propaganda. Creativity was stifled, and intellectual discourse was reduced to echo chambers of hate. The vibrant tapestry of American culture, woven with threads from all over the world, unraveled, leaving behind a dull and colorless fabric. As the situation worsened, people began to flee the country. The wealthy and well-connected found safe havens abroad, while the less fortunate risked everything to cross borders illegally. The exodus left a vacuum that was quickly filled by those who profited from chaos and disorder. The United States became a land of ghost towns and abandoned cities, its once bustling streets now eerily quiet. In their focus on hatred, the country's leaders neglected the environment. Forests were clear-cut, rivers were polluted, and air quality plummeted. Natural disasters, once rare, became common, but the government ignored the signs, too consumed by its own agenda. The land, once fertile and beautiful, turned barren, reflecting the desolation in the hearts of its people. In the midst of this darkness, a small group of survivors held on to the memory of a different America, one built on unity, diversity, and love. They lived in secret, preserving the stories and values of the past, hoping that one day, the seeds of hatred would wither and die, making way for new growth. They were the keepers of hope, the last flickering flame in a world gone dark. One day, a child from this group found a dusty, forgotten book that told tales of a time when people of all colors, religions, and beliefs lived together in harmony. Inspired by these stories, the child vowed to rebuild the broken nation, brick by brick, heart by heart. And so, from the ashes of a society consumed by hatred, the faint promise of a new dawn began to rise.